I want to welcome Dr. Rhett Gayle, who is going to be presenting tomorrow, Pentecost Sunday, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit within the framework of the incarnation, what that might mean as related from the early Christian mystics. But first of all, we're going to have a conversation with the presenters that have presented until now. And so the question that I want to ask for the presenters, that is Professor Dupisani, and that is Jeff Bloomberg, and that is Marcus, and Jude Caravan, and now David, is in listening to your fellow presenters. In listening to your fellow presenters, what was it that touched you in what you experienced with your fellow presenters? And it can be any particular one or number of ones. Just reflect on that and share with us. And then after that, we're going to open up to the general group to participate. So whoever's ready to go when you're ready.
Yeah, can I start?
Professor
Claudius?
Dupisani, you were the first to present.
Yeah, just very briefly, what struck me is the one big word that runs through all these presentations is the word hope. I started off by saying Smuts was the messenger of hope in the time of anxiety after the Great War. And all the other presenters sort of linked up with that idea. Jeff's idea of how Smuts tried to create a new image of God. Marcus, Jude, and David, each one of them focused quite a bit on that. And I think what they achieved is to break open the the how the concept of holism is in essence a message of hope. So that's all that I want to say now at the beginning.
Yes, I I valued myself and learning to learn more about Smuts. No, and as it happens, I'm also an alumnus of Christ College, Cambridge, and I'm going there for a dinner next month, and so I will look forward to seeing his portrait, which I'm pretty sure is in the hall. And he struck me. One of the things I meant to say when I was talking about representative men is that had he'd been alive in the time of Emerson, then I think that Smuts would have been a representative man in the sense that Goethe and the others were. And so I think it's very valuable to focus on his contribution, and particularly that holism has made enormous advances, in the last 100 years, and we have a much better understanding of how that manifests particularly in science and biological sciences. And hope, I think it's when I was writing my book called The Protein Crunch, which is about the future of food and the environment, over 10 years ago, one of the things I noticed when I was reading a lot of environmental books is that the sort of first 11 chapters of 12 would be a kind of doom and gloom scenario, and that things are awful, and then the last chapter would be about hope, and really the hope has to be conditional, because the hope, in other words, unless X, Y, Z happens, and we're still in this situation, then we're still going around the same track, and that's really the dilemma, because the system we have and the people we collectively are at this moment are not up to the job. And that's why we need a new consciousness, a higher frequency, a different sense of how we relate to each other in the world. And I think that was prefigured very much in Smuts's vision for the League of Nations and the UN, that we have, and the last remark of Jean Houston, we have to move to more collaborative, cooperative systems rather than empire trying to out empire another empire and ruining the planet in the process.
Thank you.
I'm happy to carry on the theme of hope, and thank you, Kobus, for raising it. When I was speaking, and David for continuing that, I mentioned that I wrote a book called Hope, Healing Our People on Earth. And I wrote it back in 2010, and I began each chapter with a quote on hope. So I've just looked up the manuscript from all those years ago, and it was the final chapter of the book, chapter 24, which is 12 times 2, so a good sort of masculine, feminine, Christed energy. And it's called Our Cosmic Destiny, 2012 and beyond, as it was then. And the quote that I mentioned was, "The moment that God created hope was the first moment of creation." And I actually wrote that myself. That's what came through for the final words in that book. The first moment of creation was when God created hope. So I very much agree with my fellow presenters, and I'm sure all of us here, that authentic hope, that which we can stand on and reach forward with, is the invitation of the universe. And I just wanted to mention one other word, which a number of us also brought in, which is of love, and to take love seriously, and to appreciate that it is foundational to the very nature of our universe, and of course to who we fundamentally are. And I was so grateful to see both of those co-weave through our various perspectives. I talk about, we talk a lot at the moment about paradoxes. And I invite a consideration of a different word, which is parallax. Because paradox is trying to, in a way, navigate between what appear to be opposites or irreconcilable. But parallax is a different ways of seeing the whole. Just seeing through different directions, but seeing the wholeness of things. And perhaps that's helpful for us as we navigate these times of unity and in diversity, not to diminish the diversity, but to celebrate it, and celebrate it from a grounding of love and of hope.
Thank you.
Can I go, Claudius?
Yes, please.
Okay. What I'm going to say might dampen spirits slightly. The spirit of hope. Because we've got to keep this grounded with Smuts. And when Smuts asked where was the god of holism at Versailles, to be honest, he never found that god of holism until he died. Because when he met up with Hitler and Mussolini in the Second World War, he questioned, how does a god create personalities like this? And he expresses this in his letters to Margaret. He had an evolutionary hope. He had hope in evolution, hope in the evolution by natural selection. That he always believed in. But what he came to understand later in life was that the evolution, holism, didn't always lead to good. He really came face to face with evil when he confronted Hitler head on. So when Kobus, Professor Kobus says, alles sal regkom, as alleen doen sy plig. Am I right, Doctor? That is an expression which Smuts used his whole life. Alles sal regkom. Everything will come right. But it was an expression, it was an evolutionary expression, that evolution will somehow work out. And to David's point, he believed in hope, but you have to do something about it. Marcus's point, what is your footprint looking like? So if you don't do anything about it, what chances do we have of changing the course of evolution? But he was very realistic towards the end of his life. He was pessimistic too. And could we change the course of evolution? He always had faith in his theory of holism, that there was a tendency towards unity in this universe, but he did not always believe that their tendency towards unity meant good. So I had to just throw that in. My reflections on the other panelists, David's talk, Jude, Kobus, Marcus. Well, Marcus, for me, as a young man, Marcus, you have an unbelievable interpretation, the way you are seeing what is happening to the destruction of our civilization that we're living in right now. The way you are able to articulate, you are witnessing this in real time, and your ability to express it in your songs, if I can call them that. In the honor of Blake, you are singing the song of the earth, and it's beautiful to see and to listen to. Kobus, I've mentioned the Alles sal regkom. I think that should be something that expression should be part of nature's point of view, that we should celebrate as an expression of what Smuts lived with. And Jude and David, I see, to use Gregory Bateson's words of the pattern that connects. Listening to David and Jude, all the many authors that you mentioned, David, you just hear the pattern connecting all the time. So it all comes together very, very nicely for me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
If I could I mention just one thing, just one thing that, two more things, sorry. David mentioned God as the spirit of the whole when he was interpreting Smuts's idea of God. That was the first phase, but he ended where God was the whole. God is no longer the spirit of the whole. He ends with God as the whole, because God as the spirit of the whole is still a dualism that he was nagging him, and he solved that later in life. And then on the issue of love, I've just taken out one of my letters that I will be publishing. It's 27th of January, 1944. Smuts is writing to Margaret, of course, and he says, I do believe that holism is in the end what is generally called love, and the key to all existence in this universe. Love, the unifier and the motive power of this world, is the synthetic whole-making agency or principle. It is therefore at bottom the same as creative holism. And God is love, as we know, on the highest authority. In other words, God is holism. God is love. I thought I'd just share that letter that he wrote to Margaret. Thank you, Claudius.
Thank you. When you're ready, Marcus.
I'm suffering a little from what I tried to describe yesterday briefly, which is that there's an awful lot going on in me that I find it very difficult to find the words, which is one of the reasons why I write, because it's a very long, slow process to find enough words for a single page, although there is so much behind it that wants to be said. But there are a few things that have crystallized for me. One is be kind with me, because I'm worried that the words will come out in the wrong way, but I'm just going to go for it. One is that I have, in my relationship with Smuts goes through you, Claudius, and I've always felt both constrained and tethered and liberated in this duality, and that is this in your life everything goes back to Smuts, and that's for me. So, but look at all these other people who have said so many things that are all very much in line and so similar, and if holism is true, mustn't it be true that so many other people will say the same things? And yet in this conference I found so many levels that revealed themselves through the deepest attention to just one person, which therefore helped me understand so many other people with so much greater attention, because there was this focus on one person in the main, in the festival. And this duality, this paradox that I'm now seeing as a parallax, thank you, Jude, really is a fascinating phenomenon for me that I'm deeply grateful for, Claudius, your insistence on, but Smuts said, and now I'm learning to see so many more layers in it, and yet the world is opening up through the focus on one man's writing and the depth that so many perspectives bring to it. So that is one way of, for me, looking at the talks as a kaleidoscope of the world with a focus. And the other thing that came up for me is that you see behind me a map of the Mandelbrot fractal universe, and there was not enough time to talk about this, but one of the reasons I found it difficult to finish my book is because I'm just so loving the many convergences that come together of different knowledge systems, that in the end I try to, because we live in the age we do, and I'm trying to get over the woo-woo element of it and into the hard matter, say, of numbers. And one of the trails I've been tracing is that fractal mathematics is a language that allows us to take literary, poetic, scientific, astrological, all sorts of phenomena from the ECG readings of healthy hearts through landscapes that inspire us as beautiful. And we arrive in a fractal range of 1.3 to 1.5 in all these, you just have to trust me on that. I'm not going to go into the depth, but the fractal mathematics reveals that there is a confluence in a range, not in a point, but in a range. And that range is 1.3 to 1.5. And the two extremes outside of this are 1 and 2. Either everything goes into a, it coalesces into a gravity and then has to implode because it has no breathing space. It falls apart in too much selfhood, if you want. That's the Apollo I was pointing to. Or on the other hand, you've got the Dionysian dissolution into the chaos of 2. Everything resolves. And you need this struggle in the range of 1.3 to 1.5, which is the reminder for me why I have that map. So I can, when I see, I'm always seeing the map behind me. It's hard for me to explain why I bring that up, but it's to do with this opening up of the many different perspectives through the one person, Jan Smuts, that leads to a range of perspectives rather than a narrowing of the perspective, which is why I said I feel so tethered and so liberated. And that I hope that's made sense to share that in this way.
Claudius, may I say a word? Thank you, Margaret.
And then I'll go after you, Jude, if I may.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to refer back to Jean Houston, who David mentioned, and it was a dear friend of mine. And you mentioned, thank you for the parallax, Marcus. And maybe, again, part of that is to reframe struggle as a dance. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that Jean's theme tune was Dancing Queen by ABBA. And I fondly remember being on the stage of the United Palace Theatre in New York with Jean and Dwayne Elgin and Lynn McTaggart dancing to Dancing Queen. So
Right.
just invite that.
Yes, I just want to respond to Jeff on two fronts. One is that God as the whole means that you have to go with Jung to some extent and say, well, that also contains what we call evil. And I've been reading there's a book by called The Threshold by Kingsley, which I reviewed for the current issue of Paradigm Explorer, and he draws on Steiner to talk about the cosmic role of evil. And the cosmic role of evil in the sentence is for us to ascend. In other words, for us to not resist, because then you're in duality, but to alchemize. That's what happens with suffering. To alchemize this and to say we can't go on like this. We have to find a higher way forward. We cannot go on like this. And I think many people on the planet are feeling exactly that in the face of the various challenges that we are setting ourselves, and we are setting ourselves our own evolutionary challenges. And I'm reminded of, in that respect, the work of Chris Beige. Many of you will be familiar with this, but he has these incredible cosmic visions, LSD in the cosmic mind, 72 LSD sessions, and he goes into the heart and the pit of the universe. And so the extremes of bliss and good and the extremes of evil and separation and suffering. And it's like we have to go through this in order to come out the other side. And it's the realization that we have, and I'm sure this must have been something that must have gone through Smuts' mind in relation to Hitler, which is a false form of unity. He unified in order to divide with nationalism and fascism and everything, the persecution and everything. And so I think we have to, and that's what Jung's philosophy there was Gnostic in a sense, and that we have to realize that there is this principle and force which I think is operating through people at the moment, and that we do literally have a battle for the soul. I think this is Greg Braden argues this, and then so that was one point. The second point, I was very glad to hear that letter, Jeff, because I was kind of missing the love element in his philosophy in what I was able to read, and this is from this book. This is Peter Dunoff here. The basic principle of existence is love, which is a manifestation and essence of the spirit. And it is the inner unity of existence. It is the inner unity of existence. As objective manifestations of the spirit in the human world, life and mind appear. The mind cannot manifest itself without life, without the heart. And the human spirit cannot manifest itself without love. There's plenty more where that comes from. But this speaks to the necessity of developing this philosophy and ethic and science of unity of love as a driver and a form of understanding, and using our thought power to generate such a culture.
Can only shake my head.
Go. Yes. Marcus?
Well, I really appreciate you quoting Jung, David, in the way you have. I've personally been in 11 years of Jungian analysis, and I exited that when my Jungian analyst disagreed with the diagnosis of autism. She felt that that autism was about the self falling apart, when for me it was suddenly a recognition that I have a different way of knowing the world by my neurodiversity and by that way of being, which you could put me into another club of the autists, but for me it was a moment of individuating through my brokenness, if you want, because I suddenly realized things I was wrestling with as trauma weren't actually trauma. They were a way of being different that, once I saw it as such, no longer were broken, because I could suddenly endorse that. I have different sleep patterns. I have dreams. I have a dream journal of over 400 dreams, which I love to interpret. I struggle with institutional authority at work, but I can do really good work. But I have to do that in a way that that is a bit darker and all sorts of things. So I had to embrace this as, how do I find the wholeness of my being, not in being broken in one way of life, but in the way I can work with my environment and find people who see the contribution I can make rather than the difficulty I cause. And so this was a recognition. So I don't disagree with my 11 years in Jungian psychoanalysis. I took a lot with me, and one of them was I really had to descend into my own darkness to find the light, which was ironically the one thing that my Jungian analysts could not allow me to do, because it felt as though it was against my individuation as opposed to in its favor. And so I can see Smuts struggling with Hitler. My father struggled with my father was German, and he struggled as a post-war child with the question he posed his elders, which was, how could you do this? How could you support this? And why do you now have nothing to say? It was a lifelong struggle that was never resolved. The issue, though, I found is that there's always this idea that the collective darkness can't somehow individually be addressed. So when we focus on the ascent only, we kind of, in fractal mathematics terms, we go to one, we miss the living range, and what happens is an explosion of all that life that wants to come out. And so I'm wondering, I don't want to say that evil isn't evil, but what I'm saying is that there's an energy behind it that is one that has been repressed. It has been misunderstood. And in its misunderstanding, it becomes evil. But the force behind it doesn't originate evil in its intent. It originates evil in its not being allowed. I was a very unhappy, depressed person when autism was unknown was a thing that caused me lots of problems. But when I realized the gifts in it, I found myself not being depressed. And this is, I think, expandable into a collective phenomenon where we struggle with things that become easily explainable as the phenomena of small boats, that somehow a small group of people crossing the channel makes the entire nation of the United Kingdom unhappy, is a simplification of a process that lacks self-reflection about what's actually going on in our own country, for example, and not dealt with in the right ways could easily lead to the phenomena of Hitler repeating. But underneath it is a life that wants to be lived, and it wants to be expressed in joy and love. And in its frustration, it becomes the evil, would be my attempt at helping that. And lastly, in fractal mathematics, in fractal geometry, you have plenty of branches that are that essentially die. Which is why I disagree with the idea of linear progress. Certainly not linear progress of consciousness. Consciousness is a phenomenal dance, to pick up your word there, dancing queen, in so many different guises and shapes, and sometimes they just need to recurse back on themselves in order to give life to what actually wanted to come through. Thank you.
I'm thinking of the... Yeah, go on.
No, carry on, Claudius.
Carry on. Jeff?
I was just going to pick up again on what Marcus said about evil and what David said about evil in relation to Smuts. From his writings, he's trying to say that he doesn't recognize evil. Evil, as soon as you recognize evil, it's an abstraction for him. So he doesn't want to abstract evil from good, because that's breaking up the whole. So he builds evil is part of the process towards that perfect unity. You're standing on evil as you're progressing towards unity. The same way as materialism. He doesn't reject materialism. That's an abstraction. To argue we're too much of a materialistic society, those are abstractions for Smuts. Materialism is a phase in holism. It's a phase towards the spiritual, because for him, mind and life evolve out of matter. And all of this is part of the whole. It's just different phases and just different expressions of the whole on a journey towards perfect unity. So I think you mentioned that, David, and
Yeah.
Marcus, the same thing. You're building, it's part of the energy that you need. It's part of that phase that you need. That's how I'm reading Smuts at the moment from his writings on when he talks about evil. I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay, come in, Rhett.
Hello. You guys don't know me yet because I didn't present yet. So yesterday I got an email from Joshua saying, hey, could you say something about yourself so that I can introduce you tomorrow? And I wrote something and I showed it to my wife, and my wife said, I don't think so. But I thought I would share the first sentence of the thing that I didn't submit to be used because of some things that came up today that made me think maybe it would be okay. And I said, what I'm interested in is turning the lead of human suffering into the gold of wisdom. And since alchemy came up several times today, my wife mostly goes to mainstream philosophy conferences where alchemy is kind of a bad word. So she suggested I avoid it. But I thought that would be a good way of introducing me. And since we were like things we noted or whatever, you talked about Jung and synchronicity, and I wanted to mention that Amazon decided this morning, to recommend Federico Fagin's Irreducible to me, which I've never heard of or seen before in any way whatsoever. And there it was. So now I'm excited about that. I was super jazzed by all the presentations that I was able to go to, which was not all of them, but I was super jazzed. And I think one of the things I really got out of it was, there are other people who are very deep intellectually, who care about and are interested in and know about things that I care about and know about and am interested in, which is rarer than I would like it to be. So I feel very gifted in meeting you all and hearing, getting to know your minds. And hopefully I will be able to contribute to the discussion tomorrow.
Rhett, please give an invitation what that will be about very briefly.
Well, about 18 months ago, I died of a heart attack. And then I came back and I discovered that I was the Messiah. So I thought I would reveal that tomorrow. No, I'm not. That is not what I'm talking about. Although I did die 18 months ago. I am going to be talking about using a word that came up in some things I saw today in earlier conversation, pre-imperial Christian mysticism, probably mostly focusing on Maximus, although there's a big dollop of Assisi in the way I think about things. And I will be connecting Christian mysticism, the process of humans becoming God, theosis, with holism. So I'll be talking about that and how Christianity can be, isn't always, but could be a resource for those of us who are wanting to create a new world, and that there are plenty of symbolic, metaphorical, spiritual, etc. resources in the Christian story which could be of great service to us, especially given that it is woven into the culture that we grew up in, whether or not we think it's true or not. I'm not arguing for its truth. So I don't know, is that good enough? Is that, I think the core, maybe this would help. You said this early. The core, I'm not sure what the right word is, insight, fact, story, to go back to Marcus, is that not only are we seeking God, but God is seeking us so strongly that God showed up. We had a party where we wanted God to be there, and God showed up. That's the incarnation. And that, I think, then we don't have a supernatural God, even though God is transcendent, but not supernatural, because God was a person, after all, in this story. And it's only a story. I'm not arguing for Christianity. I'm just saying there's power in it, and it's built into some aspect of our unconscious, and we might as well use it if we can find a way to make it useful. And I'm hoping to offer such. Okay, that's as good as it's getting.
Thank you so much. So tomorrow is Pentecost Sunday.
That's right.
And the spirit of the Holy Spirit, you'll be so welcome tomorrow. We're going to open up to the rest of the group now to interrogate, query, question, observe on what you've seen and heard. Stick up your hand. Your question doesn't need to be profound. It can just be...
We have Aura has put her hand up. Well,
Aura.
not a virtual hand, but a real hand.
Aura.
Hi there. I just wanted to reflect on all the things that are showing up, and in my sadly limited participation in various groups because of my other invitations. I wanted to ask a question. Have we come to a felt or to a felting space where we can relinquish and release the sociopathological narrative that we seem to be constantly dueling with in this moment together? And is it possible to begin to ask of ourselves a certain existential discipline as not being the superior race that's got all the answers and ideas and yada, 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 but that we're actually part of that cloth, of that fabric, and therefore humbly we listen differently and without the sociopathological narrative that keeps us in good and bad, right and wrong, ascendance and descendants, darkness, lightness, etc., but rather just belonging. And I touch back on my very deep experience when I was listening to Marcus Link yesterday, which was that sense of the timbre of his voice, the pacing of the conversation, the sense that there was a weaving going on between us in that share that didn't have anything to do with the pathologies that seemed to be the focus of trying to raise consciousness. Rather, we're already conscientious. And I'm just wondering, I'd just like to throw that out into the fold. Thank you.
Thank you, Aura. Who's ready to respond to that question?
David.
I
David.
think, yes. I mean, we're in a kind of no man's land, between stories. And I think what you've identified is the need for a new story, and this was something that Thomas Berry was particularly exercised with among many other thinkers. And the idea that the world is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects, and that, I think, in itself brings us back to relationship and what our relationships are with ourselves, with each other, and with nature, and with the divine. And the new story is a new relationship. And one of the I don't know how many of you read Resurgence, but the current issue of Resurgence is on stories. And one of the first articles is about the need to go beyond the story of the hero's journey, which is the individualistic, we all know it very well from Joseph Campbell, towards a story more of partnership and belonging and relating, and so I think this is being articulated. And I think one of the other points that you made, which I think is very, very important, and which I was also making, is this need to go beyond this categorization of good and evil, and particularly it's just used wholesale in geopolitics. Who is the demon of the moment? Well, it was Saddam Hussein. Now it's Putin. Or it's going to be someone else. It's the Ayatollahs. It's the regime in Iran. We're the good guys. We don't have a shadow. We're all for the good. And this is very, very toxic and pathological, because it means that you don't recognize yourself, and you don't recognize the other either. And what it means in political terms is you can't have diplomacy. Because we're the good guys, and we'd have to impose our view on the bad guys, because the bad guys can't be trusted, because they're the bad guys, and yet we behave as the bad guys as well, and we can't be trusted either. And so this is we need to grow up. This is so basic. That the idea that, and yet it makes good news, it makes good propaganda, it brings people together, quote unquote. But at the same time, it simply perpetuates a pattern which is ultimately self-defeating and is unconscious.
Marcus?
Yeah, my response goes back to the early 2000s when there was a book. Sadly, I forget the author. Maybe you can help me. The book was about cultural creatives. It was called, and the thing that struck me about it was that it made a thing about the story that is told by what it called the postmodern media complex, which essentially gives the impression of a uniform global story and essentially gives everyone the feeling that that is the news. And cultural creatives exist in the state of loneliness outside of that uniform global story. At least they're somehow trying to keep up, somehow trying to be part of it, but also notice a different experience. And what the book was, for me at least, trying to say is that actually there's a majority of people who feel they live in isolation, who actually make up the majority of the planet, who are not part of this postmodern news story cycle. It has a different intent, but it's very hard to break through its it's flattening existence. It was only then when I found, actually through my therapy, the English painter Cecil Collins' work on the Fool, where he describes this not as cultural creatives, which in a way is a term that almost makes you part of what the cultural creatives book was arguing against. It's not archetype that's strong enough to break through the other side. But Cecil Collins' Fool with a capital F did that. He described that there are so many of us who find ourselves in loneliness at any time in history, in our culture, in our society, and we suddenly realize that we are of the fool. And that we have, in that sense, a community that is not just all the other fools in all these other places that are not yet connected, but we are connected in deep time, in kairotic time, as the Greeks called it, the timelessness, which is actually the time fullness, where we are always in touch with that original proto-mind that is exploring in myriad different ways how to be conscious, how to be, how to explore, how to dance. And that has given me a experience of companionship that is actually at the deepest recess of my cave, in my darkness, but I feel so beautifully connected. And this event here has actually lifted something off my shoulders, this festival, because I felt burdened by that. I felt alone in a way, and I felt, oh, hang on, where is the dinner party where I can talk about what I'm interested in? So I wrote a book, and then here I got to talk about it, and I suddenly feel there's a whole community back there in that cave. And I'm absolutely delighted. And I feel, at least for the last few days, an increasing sense of joy rather than despair about these times. Thank you for that question, Aura, and to Kobus and Jeff and Jude and David and whatever it was in myself that allowed me to participate. And Rhett.
Jude.
Well, I haven't really been here.
Thank you. Aura, thank you too for that question. Speaking to it and the storytelling, I think that's really important. We are a narrative sharing, story sharing social species. And the stories, the underlying narrative, which often we don't really see. We see the stories as on the surface, but we don't necessarily question the deeper narrative. And I feel what we're sharing during this time together is that evolution of that underlying narrative, from separation to holism and oneness and unity and diversity. So I think these stories are coming forward because the narrative itself is changing. But I just wanted to refer, I wasn't sure who mentioned Joe Campbell. One of us mentioned Joseph Campbell. David, thank you. And, you know, the hero with 1,000 faces and the whole idea of the hero's journey. And all of those stories are about me, my journey, my night of the dark soul, my, you know, going out into the wilderness and finding a call and coming home somehow. And it seems to me that we're at a time now where instead of the me, we can expand the space of that journey to we. And I came up with a term a while ago called the weirdo's journey. And it's more than just a sort of a joke, because weird in Old English means the way of wisdom. So it was a play on moving from me to we, and it was a play on a way of wisdom rather than knowledge. So the weirdo's journey, and going back to what you were saying, Marcus, not to feel alone. Because in the weirdo's journey, we find each other and we come together. And in doing so, we can, it seems to me, serve the good of the whole. And I just wanted to say a little bit on evil. Because as a healer and working with psycho-spiritual healing for many decades with individuals and beyond that, I've seen the same patterns playing out in a fractal way. For individuals, for families, for friendship groups, to nations, to our whole collective. So for me, where we meet these expressions of trauma or dysfunctionality, or, you know, an individuated expression such as Hitler, it's part of our collective, it seems to me, it's part of our collective psyche, mirroring back to us what we have not yet healed.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it offers us, it seems to me, our response to it then is a way shower to how we move forward together, in terms through that healing journey, through that weirdo's journey, through that journey of homecoming and remembering.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jude, for that. I just wanted to pick up on the culture of creative. I put the details of the book in the chat. I remember reading it 25 years ago, or whatever it was. But some of you will also have read The Turning Point by Fritjof Capra, which is 1980. I actually read that with my pupils at Winchester College. I got them to read it, which some of them might even remember it. But it goes back to Arnold Toynbee, who I was talking about, the study of history, and he says that when you have a civilization in decline and you've got what he calls a dominant minority, and you can see this in the authoritarian tendencies that are surfacing in our culture at the moment. You also have the creative minority, and the creative minority is he puts it at about 5% of the culture, and the creative minority is formulating the next wave, and that's really, in a sense, what we've been talking about over the last few days. Is that there's a huge amount of work going on in the margins, which is really the new story, the new science, the power of love, regeneration, healing, you name it. It's all happening, and it's happening. A lot of it's happening. It's visible through the scientific and medical network, and through whole world view, and through other ions, and so on. And so there is this is all, it's all beginning to cohere, but it's not on the radar. And the vast majority of people out there, they don't know this is going on. They just see the mainstream news and they despair, which is what they're meant to do. Meant to despair, meant to become anxious, fearful, think they got no power, can't do anything, the world is going to hell, and I can't do anything about it. But in fact, that actually isn't true, as Jean, the quotations I was giving today, as Jean maintained. And so that means we have to take that initiative ourselves, and then ask ourselves, and we were asking ourselves this at the Spirit of Humanity Forum, how do we make this more visible? Because what we are, and Johanna, the director of the Spirit of the West, she gave an incredible speech at the opening of this event, and I went up to her afterwards and I said, Iceland has got to send you to the UN to give that speech in the General Assembly in September, because this, or the president have to give it. She might well be able to do that, because this is what people want to hear. They don't want to hear all this chaos and disintegration and, we're well going down the tubes. They want to hear what we can actually do, how we can think, how we can be differently together, how we can cooperate, collaborate, and bring in all these principles that I was talking about, and Jude's been talking, we've all been talking about: mutuality, mutual aid, reciprocity, helping each other, cooperation, collaboration, synthesis, synergy, and so on. And so I think we need to think how all these impulses can become more visible to the general public, and then they will say, yes, there's something going on here that I really want to be a part of.
Thank you. And so I'm going to just invite the people who are present, stick up your hand and just articulate what this has meant for you until now. And we'll take that into our meeting with Rhett tomorrow, when we look at Pentecost Day and the Holy Spirit. What has it meant for you until now? Just stick up your hand and articulate that.
Ross?
You want to make it, Ross, you want to talk?
A little bit.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Claudius and Michelle and all the court people for making this happen, all the presenters. And I'm going to offer an indigenous point of view that for me, it relates to what everything's been said, only it's using different words. But for me, it's the same spiritual principle. there's a tribe in North America called the Sioux, is where it came from, but I've expanded on that. It's called Matakwiosan, and that means all my relations. When I first heard this term, it meant all my relations means all living life on the planet at this time. And I used that for years until I heard the interpretation I'm going to share, and that is, now what that means to me is it not only includes every living being and form of life on Earth, it includes every ancestor that's ever been, and it includes all the future generations. So for me, that's another form of saying with fewer words about what holism, my interpretation of what holism is at this point. And yeah, I really felt the need to share that part of it because I see parallels. I've done my own investigation about different religions and quantum physics and everything you talked about, or almost everything, including, I want to thank you so much about educating me about Jan Smuts, because I didn't know a whole bunch of what I just found out in the last 4 days. So I appreciate that. It expanded my vision about what you're creating. And I'll leave it about with that co-creative power, because I haven't given up hope. I really appreciate you mentioning that, but I haven't given up hope at all on humanity. And that means, but that comes with a speculation, stipulation, meaning, like I heard before. Hope is one thing, but with hope without action and me engaging, participating in it to help co-create a world, it just stays inside of me, really, so I feel like, yes, it's absolutely possible. Yes, it is happening. All of you are examples of how it's happening and can happen. The thing is, masses of humanity has not came to this, I'll say, awareness. And that's okay. Apparently, in my view, that another native way of saying that's the way it's supposed to be, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. But I keep pointing the finger back at myself of like, it's my responsibility to make that change within myself before I can change anything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Taryn.
Taryn.
Taryn, you're on mute. Ah, that's it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I would have to agree with what Ross just had to say. Pretty much is what I have to say, and it's just so inspiring to see as well from a not just a woo-woo side of, we've all one and we like love and light and all of that, that there's so much deep intellectual research and passion and everything that's going behind it, which this festival has brought to light, that there are so many people who are on the same wavelength. And I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for sharing and doing the work yourselves and just bringing all these very important messages to the forefront to share with us. And I just hope that we can ripple further out because, we are the way forward. And it'd be good to do that. I don't know if Mark has anything you want to add.
No, not at this point. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, everybody. And I look forward to continuing this and to the liminal space when we get to that as well.
Thank you, Taryn.
Barry.
Barry.
Barry, you're on mute.
You're muted, Barry.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank
you, Claudius. I just want to express that I am blown away at the timing of this conference for me personally, and just at the expansion of consciousness that I feel so deeply immersed in this company and in the incredible presentations that I feel incredibly privileged to have listened to. And in fact, when I say listen to, I feel like I am in dialogue with all of you right now. I have also, at the same time, been immersed in transdisciplinary and transcivilizational dialogue, a book about the particular topic. And it feels as if all of this is speaking into some missing pieces that I had. I am so appreciative of the fact that we are bringing the voice of Africa. Smuts is a son of Africa, bringing that voice into an international conversation that is a conversation that is beyond space and time, and it's through, and it's just through all of the cosmos. I don't even have the word to describe to you exactly what I'm feeling, but it is so expansive and so inclusive. And for me, that feels like the absolute building block, an architecture of bridging, a new architecture of life that I feel as if we are in some kind of collective emergence. So I just wanted to share that. It's just been so amazing to be part of this, and I look forward to more. I can't tear myself away. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Anyone more? Thank you so much, Marcus.
I just have a book recommendation, which actually is one from David to me when a few years ago I gave my first talk as part of the Holos project. It was called Alchemy of Wholeness, my talk. And afterwards, David recommended the book by P.W. Martin, Experiment in Depth, which takes Toynbee and Jung and Eliot as three examples of what he called the archetype of withdrawal and return, expanding on, if we want, Jungian psychology. He was a Jungian psychologist, but he does that in a beautiful way by using these three lives as reading their biography as the role of those who go into this process of withdrawal and return, which I think I see. So I know now that you gave that to me, not just as the right book at the time in the small way, but also in a really big way, David. And I see cycles and ripples, and I felt that it is a good read to recommend because of the work it did in me and for me, and it came from you, someone I deeply admire, and I'm very humbled to have spoken in a forum with so many people of such caliber, and there's little me. Thank you.
Could you repeat the name of the book, please?
Experiment in Depth.
Depth.
Yeah, Depth. P.W. Martin. I must reread it. It's in my library in Scotland, so I'll have to have another look at it when I go next.
Okay.
Who is the Eliot you talk about, Marcus?
It's the poet T.S. Eliot.
T.S. Eliot. Thank you.
To arrive again where we began and know the place for the first time, that Eliot.
Got him.
So thank you so much. So over to Michael.
Thank you, Claudius. Well, a few words from me. We're at the end of day 4 in what has been a wonderful week. Thank you all for great company and to our presenters today. Kobus, hope has been a theme. Yes, it has. And Jeff, just seriously about reality, where was holism in the time of Hitler or the Treaty of Versailles? Marcus, I was delighted to hear the way you summed up your experience, both tethered and liberated and lifted. Maybe that speaks for many of us. And thanks to Jude for noting really that hope on its own maybe isn't enough. It has to be authentic. And there is this parallax view. And thanks to David, particularly for the invitation to us all who've been on this phase 1 to see Jan Smuts as a representative man. That was wonderfully true. Tomorrow, the good news is it starts half an hour later. So that's almost time for breakfast. With Dr. Rhett, Gayle and Dr. Claudius Van Wyck. I don't know who this Dr. Claudius Van Wyck is. We haven't seen much of him, but I hear he's really good. And then phase 2, finally, please register for phase 2, which starts with an event on the 10th of June with Dr. Glenn Martin on a theme which I think is going to appeal to many of us: holism, an ecosystem governing for planet Earth. See you tomorrow. Great journeys.